Hello and welcome back. Today we look at the most disgraced sportsmen, from football, American football, to boxing and even some Olympians. Obviously some cases are more famous than others and some have more detail. But the case we start off with is probably one of the most famous, Oscar Pistorius. He was born in South Africa in 1986 and at 11 months had both his legs amputated below the knee because of a defect. He ran on blades and he had the nickname the Blade Runner. He always loved sports and through school in Johannesburg he played rugby, water polo and Olympic wrestling. He suffered an injury in rugby and began to put his focus on running. His motto on sports being, "You're not disabled by the disabilities you have, you are able by the abilities you have." He went on to compete in many Olympics and championships. In the 2008 Summer Olympics, in the 100 metres, he set a Paralympic record with his time of 11.16 seconds and he won 3 golds. In the London Summer Olympics in 2012, he won another gold. He really is a very decorated athlete. He was seen as an inspiration for many. He released a book, received awards from governments and had many TV appearances. Oscar had a girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp. Riva was a South African model and paralegal. She modelled for FHM magazine and was the first face of Avon Cosmetics in South Africa. She worked as a TV presenter on many shows and was a member of the South African celebrity circuit. She was a regular A-list guest at red carpet events and she's noted as being a socialite on the Johannesburg party scene. They had been dating since November 2012, but unfortunately 29-year-old Riva lost her life on Valentine's Day in 2013. She was at Oscar Pistorius' home and in the early hours of the morning went to the bathroom. He says that he mistook her for an intruder and fired 4 times, taking her life. He was taken into police custody and charged with taking her life. He told police that he thought Riva was in the bed and that the person in the toilet was an intruder. He had a bail hearing and the South African justice system decided that he did not pose a flight risk. He was able to pay the equivalent of around $113,000. His trial was set to begin in March 2013, but even before it began, the lead detective was removed. It was disclosed that the lead detective, Hilton Buffer, was facing charges of attempting to take someone's life himself. In 2011, the lead detective along with 2 other officers were accused of firing at a taxi with 7 passengers inside during a drunken incident. This case was ultimately dropped, but it wasn't a good start to the trial. The trial began at the High Court in Pretoria. In South Africa, there is no jury, as this was abolished. There is 1 judge and 2 assessors to help reach a verdict. He stood trial for taking the life of Riva, as well as illegal possession of ammunition and 2 charges of firing a gun in a public space. In relation to the gun charges, it was alleged that he recklessly shot his gun out of the open sunroof of a car the previous year, and the second that he fired someone else's gun at a restaurant a few weeks before he took the life of Riva. His former girlfriend, Samantha Taylor, testified that the sunroof incident occurred when Pistorius became angry after he was stopped for speeding by a police officer. She said Pistorius kept his gun with him all the time and that he could get very angry. At trial, the defence called Oscar Pistorius to tell his recollection. He said at 10 p.m. Riva did her yoga, and then they both went to bed. He took his prosthetic legs off, and they both fell asleep. He woke up because he was hot, and Riva was already awake and asked him if he was having trouble sleeping. While walking around on his stumps, he opened the balcony door and brought in a fan to try and cool down the room. The bedroom was pitch black, and while doing this he heard noises from the bathroom. He thought there was an intruder and he was too scared to turn the light on. He grabbed his pistol from underneath his bed. On the way to the bathroom, he screamed the words to the effect of them getting out of my house, and for Riva to phone the police. He said, "I noticed that the bathroom window was open. I realised that the intruder was in the toilet because the toilet door was closed. I did not see anyone in the bathroom. I heard movement inside the toilet. The toilet is inside the bathroom and has a separate door. It filled me with horror and fear of an intruder or intruders being inside the toilet. I thought he or they must have entered through the unprotected window. As I did not have my legs on, I felt extremely vulnerable and knew I had to protect Riva and myself. I believe that when the intruder came out of the toilet, we would be in grave danger. I felt trapped as my bedroom door was locked, and I have limited mobility on my stumps. I fired shots at the toilet door and shouted to Riva to phone the police. She did not respond, and I moved backwards out of the bathroom, keeping my eyes on the bathroom entrance. Everything was pitch dark in the bedroom. I was still too scared to switch on the light. When I reached the bed, I realised that Riva was not in bed. That is when it dawned on me that it could have been Riva who was in the toilet. I returned to the bathroom calling her name. I tried to open the toilet door, but it was locked. I rushed back into the bedroom and opened the sliding door, exiting onto the balcony, and screamed for help. He called out to Riva and then tried opening the bathroom door, but couldn't because it was locked. He put on his legs and then tried to kick down the toilet door. When that didn't work, he moved back to the bedroom to get his cricket bat. He used the bat to smash holes in the door. One of the door panels broke open, enabling him to reach inside and open the door. He found Riva alive, slumped over the toilet. One of their neighbours, Joanna Stipp, a radiologist, testified that he found Pistorius praying over Riva's body when he went over to help after being woken by what was described as the sound of gunshots and a woman screaming. He testified that the first thing he remembered Pistorius saying when he saw him was, "I shot her. I thought she was a burglar. I shot her." Oscar also rang the manager of the estate at around 3:15 a.m. saying, "Please, please, come to my house. I shot Riva. I thought she was an intruder. Please, please, come quick." The manager said when he arrived at Oscar's, he was screaming, he was crying, and he was praying. He said in court, "I saw the truth that morning." His defence claimed that because he thought it was an intruder, he was acting in self-defence, with no intentional motive to take Riva's life, wanted him to instead receive a sentence of the equivalent in the UK of manslaughter. Prosecution believed he did take her life and claimed it was premeditated and happened after the couple argued. Chief Prosecutor Jerry Nell said, "You fired 4 shots through the door whilst knowing that she was standing behind it." Those who lived nearby said they heard an argument and a woman screaming prior to shots being fired, although the defence say that these were the screams of Oscar Pistorius. Their relationship was analysed at trial by going through WhatsApp messages sent between the two. Now, a good percentage were normal or loving texts, but there were some sent by Riva that pointed to the toxicity in their relationship. She said, "I'm scared of you sometimes, of how you snap at me," and she described his behaviour as nasty. Out of 1,700 messages between Pistorius and Riva, only 4 conversations were argumentative. The prosecution, arguing that it was premeditated, stated that Pistorius was wearing his legs when he fired the shots, claiming that the time he took to put them on was evidence of premeditation. The prosecution's witness, Christian Mangena, a police ballistics analyst, testified the shooter was most likely not wearing the legs. The defence lawyer Rox pointed out that if Pistorius had been on his stumps, he would not have been able to balance while swinging a cricket bat with enough force to break the door. At the trial, it was actually agreed by both defence and prosecution that he was probably not wearing his legs. One of the residents that prosecution used was Michelle Berger. She said that she had heard an argument before Riva's life was taken. She lived 177 metres away from their home, but claimed to hear her screaming from behind the closed toilet door. An acoustic engineer, Ivan Lynn, testified that tests suggested that if Riva was screaming in the toilet, it was very unlikely that the screams would be audible from 177 metres away. A number of other witnesses claimed that they heard women's screams and gunshots of the night Riva passed away. The defence cross-examined these witnesses, attempting to establish that in fact this was Pistorius screaming for help and that the explosive sounds came from the door to the toilet being battered down. During the trial, Oscar Pistorius was crying, howling and vomiting. Prosecutor Jerry Nell gave quite aggressive interrogations, but claimed Pistorius had not shown any remorse and accused Pistorius of getting emotional because he was getting frustrated, that his version of events were improbable. It was also discussed that Oscar Pistorius had a real love for guns. Sean Renz, the manager of the International Firearm Training Academy, testified at trial that Pistorius had a great love and enthusiasm for guns. He described an incident which occurred a few months before Pistorius took the life of Riva, where he heard a noise in the house, drew his gun and went into combat mode. The noise turned out to be coming from his laundry machine. Renz testified that Pistorius was well aware of the rules on gun use in South Africa and how to deal with intruders. The verdict came back on the 11th of November, the judge stating that she dismissed much of the state's circumstantial evidence. He did not subjectively foresee this as a possibility, that he would take the life of the person behind the door, let alone that the deceased as he thought she was in the bedroom. Pistorius failed to take any steps to avoid the death, acted too hastily and used excessive force, and his actions were clearly negligent. On the 12th of September, the judge found Pistorius not guilty, but guilty of culpable homicide, which is the same or similar to manslaughter. He was found guilty of reckless endangerment with a firearm at a restaurant in a separate incident. He was found not guilty of the charges relating to discharging a firearm through the sunroof of a car and illegal possession of ammunition. Pistorius received a prison sentence of a maximum of 5 years for culpable homicide. He also received a concurrent 3-year prison sentence which was suspended for 5 years for the separate reckless endangerment conviction. On the 8th of June 2015, South African Commissioner of Correctional Services Zach Modee said that the Prison Case Management Committee had recommended that Pistorius be released under correctional supervision. On the 21st of August 2015, having served a sixth of his sentence, which is around 10 months, he was released. And it was also based on good behaviour, and he wasn't considered a danger to the community. Pistorius would remain under house arrest and correctional supervision, and may be required to perform community service as part of his continuing sentence. Regardless of his release from prison, Pistorius would not be allowed to return to official athletic competition until the whole 5 years of his sentence was complete. On the 5th of October 2015, the Parole Review Board referred the parole decision back to the original parole panel, stating that Pistorius should be subjected to psychotherapy as part of his parole conditions. His family questioned the legality of the delay, suggesting that he would not be treated like other prisoners due to the public and political media hype, and stated that he was already receiving ongoing psychotherapy. On the 9th of October 2015, the parole board met again and postponed a hearing until the 15th of October, stating the board would again consult the family of Riva. The parole board confirmed Pistorius would be released to house arrest on the 20th of October 2015. The prosecutors lodged an appeal against both the verdict and the sentence, arguing that the judge misinterpreted the law when she cleared Pistorius of murder on the basis that he did not intentionally shoot Riva. In December 2015, the Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the culpable homicide verdict and found Pistorius guilty of murder, concluding that Pistorius should have known that firing his gun would have killed whoever was behind the door, regardless of who he thought it was. On the 6th of July 2016, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for murder. The judge argued that Pistorius had already served 12 months in prison for the culpable homicide conviction and was remorseful for what he had done. In November 2017, the South African Supreme Court of Appeal added 9 years to his sentence, making it a total of 15 years, following a government appeal. He appealed in March 2017 and this was denied. He also did on the 31st of March 2023 and the parole was denied again. On the 5th of January 2024, Pistorius was released on parole after having served 9 years of his sentence. He still has to live under strict and intrusive parole conditions until it expires in 2029. He is reportedly undergoing bouts of therapy to help tackle his issues, encompassing gender-based violence and anger. It's also understood that Pistorius is currently living in his uncle's mansion. Case 2. Bruno Fernandes. Fernandes was born in Brazil, and between 2007 and 2009 he was a trophy-winning goalkeeper at the Brazilian club Flamengo. On the 9th of June, his girlfriend, actress and model Eliza Samodio, disappeared. She left her small town at the age of 18 to travel to the capital. She didn't know anyone in the city and experienced financial difficulty. She began working as a lady of the night to support herself until she managed to become a model. According to Fernandes, he met Eliza at a party and they had an intimate relationship that night and from that point. After the party, they began to meet frequently, and Eliza left her life of being a lady of the night to be with Fernandes at his request. Although he was married, he promised that he would separate from his wife to be with her. In August 2009, Fernandes ended his relationship with Eliza after she announced that she was pregnant with his child and refused to have an abortion. On October 13, 2009, Eliza filed a complaint with the police saying that the day prior she had been kept in a private prison by the goalkeeper and his friends and forced to take substances. She also accused them of having attacked her and said that Fernandes had pointed a weapon at her head. Fernandez released a note in which he denied the aggression. "It's not the first time she's made up this bunch of lies to try harm me. The other time she didn't prove anything, and she won't prove it again, because she made up this whole story. It got to the point where yesterday I sent an email to some newspaper officers in Rio saying that I missed Flamengo training because I was with her, but I attended both morning and afternoon practices, as all the journalists present could confirm. That's why I decided that I'm not only going to speak through my lawyer, who will take all the necessary measures to prevent her from continuing to try and harm me. She doesn't conform because I've already made it clear that I don't want any kind of relationship with her. I'm not going to give this girl the 15 minutes of fame she so desperately craves." In 2009, a judge denied Eliza's request for protection, arguing that Eliza did not have an intimate relationship with Bruno Fernandes. Eliza had her baby on the 10th of February in 2010. Fernandez refused to acknowledge the paternity, accusing her of wanting to give the coup of the belly because he has money. Eliza filed a paternity claim after arriving to live with her son in the capital city, in hotels paid for by Fernandez. She started demanding child support and accused him of assault. On June 4, 2010, Eliza went to his farm at his request, hoping to talk and resolve settlements. She still held out the hope of having a reconciliation with the goalkeeper. She then disappeared. Fernandez claimed that she left the farm of her own accord and that she abandoned her child. The baby boy was found, and the police suspect the goalkeeper's wife had left him there, and she was also investigated. On June 26, 2010, the police declared Fernandez as a suspect in her disappearance. On the 6th of July 2010, Bruno Fernandes' cousin, who was 17 years old, was found at an apartment he owned. He claimed that Bruno had hit Eliza with the butt of a gun, and he further claimed that while Eliza was unconscious, she was taken by drug dealers and had her life taken. He also claimed that he could show the police where she was. After the disappearance, Eliza's mother asked for custody of her child, which was granted. The justice system issued the arrest warrant for the teenager who gave the testimony on the 6th of July 2010 and the preventative detention of Fernandez and 7 other people. The trial of Bruno Fernandes and 7 others began on the 19th of November 2012, 2 years after Eliza disappeared. The police searched his farm to find Eliza. Women's clothes, children's objects and nappies were found. They also searched his Range Rover, which was seized as it had irregular documents. According to police, traces of Eliza's blood was found in the vehicle. Considered a key witness in the case, Bruno Fernandes' cousin was found with his life taken. According to police, he was on his way to work when he was chased by 2 men on a motorcycle. He tried to hide in a house, but he had his life taken. Fernandez was sentenced to 17 years and 6 months in a closed regime for a triple qualified homicide. He was also sentenced to another 3 years and 3 months in an open regime for kidnapping and false imprisonment, and a further 1 year and 6 months for hiding Eliza. In 2017, he tried to reduce his sentence, and it was denied. Bruno was released from prison to serve in a semi-open program for the rest of his sentence in 2019, where he could work or train in the day, while being under house arrest at night. The program was intended to have him return to jail each night, but because of the prison's inadequate facilities to accommodate the coming and going of detainees, it led to Bruno enjoying house arrest instead. Eliza has never been found. Case 3. O.J. Simpson. And of course, this case is probably the most famous, so I will briefly go through the case and any updates. He was born on July 9th, 1947 in San Francisco and was an NFL player. He had the nickname Juice. He acted in film and television, became a sportscaster and was a spokesman for a wide variety of products. He was inducted to the College Hall of Fame in 1983 and the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1985. On June 24, 1967, O.J. Simpson married his first wife, and they had 3 children. In 1977, O.J. Simpson met Nicole Brown while she was working as a waitress at a Beverly Hills nightclub called The Daisy. He was still married to his first wife when he began dating Nicole. He divorced his wife in March 1979, and then Nicole Brown and O.J. Simpson were married on February 2, 1985, 5 years after his retirement from professional football. They went on to have 2 children, and their marriage lasted 7 years. But their marriage soon became very toxic. By the end of 1989, the police had visited their home 8 times for domestic violence calls. On December 31st, she phoned the police saying that she thought that Simpson was going to take her life. She was found by officers hiding in the bushes outside their home. She was badly beaten. Authorities said Simpson had punched, slapped and kicked her. Simpson was given 2 years probation and 120 hours of community service, and he had to donate $500 to a women's shelter. Nicole filed for divorce on February 25, 1992. This was after finding out about a year-long affair O.J. Simpson had with a model. In the October, Nicole called the police to report Simpson was being violent again after he found a photo of a man Nicole had dated while they were broken up. Officers intervened but didn't really do much. A family friend claimed that Simpson had told Nicole's friends that if he ever caught her with anyone, he would take her life. After midnight on June 13, 1994, Nicole Brown and her friend Ron Goldman were found with their lives taken in the courtyard outside Nicole's condo in LA. Police determined that the crime had taken place on the night of the 12th. Ron had been at Nicole's to return a pair of her glasses that her mother had lost earlier that day. The weapon used was never found. O.J. Simpson was an immediate person of interest, and there was never any other suspect found. His story is that on the 12th he had been at home waiting for a limousine to take him to an airport for a flight to Chicago. After police gathered all the evidence, charges were filed and a warrant was signed for O.J. Simpson's arrest. Simpson failed to turn himself in, and he later became the subject of a low-speed pursuit by police while riding as a passenger in a white 1993 Ford Bronco SUV. Simpson was armed in the back of the vehicle with a pistol, holding it to his head, and threatened to shoot himself if he was not taken back to his estate. Before the trial even began, it was discovered that the police investigation had been flawed. Photo evidence had been lost or mislabeled, and DNA had been collected and stored improperly, raising a possibility that it was tainted. Prosecutors provided DNA evidence including both victims' blood being found in Simpson's car. Nicole's blood was found on Simpson's socks and hair and clothing fibres consistent with O.J. Simpson and Nicole, as well as Ron Goldman, as well as fibres from a 1993-94 Ford Bronco and Nicole's dog being found on a black leather glove recovered from Simpson's home. The other glove in the pair was found at Nicole's condo. The defence claimed that the glove found at Nicole's condo did not fit O.J. Simpson's hand, and in response, prosecutors theorised that O.J. Simpson had not been taking anti-inflammatory medications for his arthritis, which would make his hand swell if he tried to put on the glove during the trial. The defence claimed that the crime scene had been compromised using audio tape recordings of an officer who was at the scene and collected evidence. He repeatedly used the N-word in an interview with an aspiring screenwriter. The officer was later charged with perjury for lying about not saying the slur and pleaded no contest. This added to the perception that the LAPD was severely racist and very corrupt. This was also backed by the case that happened earlier of Rodney King and all the officers being acquitted. The officers who found the glove at O.J. Simpson's home actually entered without a search warrant. The defence argued that the officer planted the glove, and the jury rendered a verdict of not guilty for the two murders. Following Simpson's acquittal of criminal charges, the families of Ron Goldman and of Nicole Brown Simpson filed a civil lawsuit against O.J. Simpson. On February 5, 1997, a civil jury in California unanimously found O.J. Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of both. He was ordered to pay millions in damages to the two families. On September 13, 2007, a group of men led by O.J. Simpson entered a room at the Palace Station Hotel and Casino and took sports memorabilia at gunpoint, which resulted in O.J. Simpson being questioned by the police. Simpson admitted to taking the items which he had said had been stolen from him, but denied breaking into the hotel room. He also denied that he or anyone else carried a weapon. Along with 3 other men, O.J. Simpson was charged with multiple felony counts, including criminal conspiracy and kidnapping. On December 5, 2008, O.J. Simpson was sentenced to a total of 33 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 years. In 2017, at his parole hearing on July 20th, the board decided to grant O.J. Simpson parole with certain parole conditions, such as travel restrictions, non-contact with co-defendants from the robbery, and not drinking excessively. He was released having served almost 9 years in the October. In December 2021, O.J. Simpson was granted an early discharge from parole for good behaviour. He last posted a Twitter video on February 11th where he said he was dealing with some issues but was in good health. In the final days before he passed away, all his children visited him, and he passed away on the 10th of April 2024 at the age of 76. Case 4 is another famous case of wrestler Chris Benoit. He was a Canadian wrestler and had the nicknames the Canadian Crippler as well as the Rabid Wolverine. He was very decorated and so well known. He held 30 championships between World Wrestling Federation and World Wrestling Entertainment, World Championship Wrestling, Extreme Championship Wrestling, as well as New Japan Pro Wrestling and Stampede Wrestling. He was a 2-time world champion. He reigned as a 1-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion and a 1-time World Heavyweight Champion in the WWE. He was married twice. He had 2 children with his first wife, Martina, and by 1997 that marriage had broken down, and Benoit was living with Nancy Sullivan, the wife of WCW booker and frequent opponent Kevin Sullivan. They actually used this as a ploy for wrestling. Benoit took Kevin's wife away, but it actually turned into a real thing and they had an affair. On February 25, 2000, Chris and Nancy's son Daniel was born, and on November 23, 2000, Chris and Nancy got married. It was Nancy's 3rd marriage. In 2003, Nancy filed for divorce from Benoit, citing the marriage as broken, and she alleged cruel treatment. She claimed that he would break and throw furniture around, but she later dropped the suit as well as the restraining order she had filed. In September 1998, Chris and Nancy had an argument that led to Benoit leaving the house. Hours later, police officers found him drunk in his car sat outside of another person's home. Benoit told officers that he used to live in the house before his divorce and that he was just reminiscing. He was booked on charges of a DUI. Chris and Nancy had minor periods of separation. While Chris was recovering from his neck surgery in 2001, Nancy became alarmed that her husband was continuing to use steroids. But Chris was worried about losing his size during the time he had to recover from the operation. He felt like he had no choice. His uptake in pain pill usage around this time was also an issue between them. In May of 2003, Nancy was genuinely fearful for her and Daniel's safety and fled the home during one of Benoit's outbursts. The divorce petition also claimed that Chris had threatened to strike her. The 6-month protective order was granted, and for the next few months Chris and Nancy were separated as divorce loomed. Then one day, literally the day of the hearing to determine a longer protective order, they showed up to court holding hands and told their attorneys that they had patched things up. Eddie Guerrero was one of Chris Benoit's best friends, as well as a very well-decorated and loved wrestler. It said that Eddie knew Chris's temperament better than anyone and could talk him out of making mistakes. On November 13, 2005, in another of wrestling's greatest tragedies, Chris Benoit lost that support system. Eddie Guerrero passed away, and from this point, many people close to Chris said that he fell into a deep depression. He took a break from wrestling, and Nancy also had to undergo neck surgery. In the months before the tragedy, Benoit began displaying signs of paranoia. He talked to his friends and family about some unknown entity being out to get him and claimed that he and his family were being stalked. He started to take routes differently to routine destinations like his local gym and the airport, so he wouldn't be followed. He changed cars frequently and would constantly check the home security system. He also didn't let his son Daniel play outside unsupervised and asked that Nancy not leave the house alone after 6 p.m. There was also an issue of where Daniel would go to school because Chris didn't trust them. The family even moved house because of his paranoia. They actually moved to a quiet suburb and bought a new mansion in an area that had a very low crime rate. They got 2 large shepherd guard dogs to patrol the residence. He went back into wrestling and then tragedy struck. On June 25, 2007, Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy and their son were all found with their lives taken. On the morning of Friday, June 22nd, Chris drove his son Daniel to horse riding camp at the next door neighbour's house, Holly, before driving 40 miles to visit his physician, Dr. Phil Aston. Benoit would see Aston every couple of months for routine checkups and to replenish a long list of prescriptions. During their meeting, he complained about Nancy's moodiness and wondered aloud if she was experiencing early onset menopause, which was unlikely, but Aston said he'd look into it. On his way out, Benoit signed autographs and took pictures with waiting patients and staff members. After he had left the doctor's office, he spoke with frequent travel partner and close friend Bob Holly. Benoit met up with Ray Rawls, a previous WWE development prospect who worked as Rick Michaels. He was hired by the WWE in 2004 on the recommendation of Benoit. On that afternoon, Benoit paid Rawls for a new order and drove him home, where he spoke to travel partner Chavo Guerrero, whom he had grown increasingly close to following Eddie's passing. He also spoke on the phone to Nancy, who was food shopping for that night's cookout at a local supermarket. Benoit called a local car dealership to discuss selling one of his vehicles and ordered a call out from a pool service company. When the pool boys arrived later that afternoon, they observed Chris and Daniel outside grilling. Telephone records show that at 9:25 p.m. the Benoit house made a call requesting the number of the police department. The number issued was obsolete, non-emergency one. Regardless, no attempt was made to call it. 7 minutes later at 9:32 p.m, the Benoit home called next-door neighbour Holly, and did so again a minute later, and once more at 10 p.m. The calls went unanswered and no voice messages were left, but generally it's held that Nancy was fearing something bad was about to happen and tried calling in a panic whoever she could. Chris and Nancy had an argument upstairs in the office. Chris then bound Nancy's hands and feet with tape and took her life. When assessing the scene, there was signs that Nancy really tried to fight back. After taking her life, he put a blanket over her and placed a Bible next to her. Nancy was 43 years old. The morning after, at 8:30 a.m, Chris called the neighbour, Holly, and left a voice message wondering if Daniel was due into horse camp that day. If he was, then Daniel couldn't attend. Benoit said because he was sick. At some point in the hours after taking the life of Nancy, Chris Benoit went on to take the life of his son. Reports show that 7-year-old Daniel was sedated before he had his life taken, and Benoit placed a Bible next to him as well. At 1:57 p.m, Chris Benoit left a voicemail to the wrestler Michael Parker. And at around 3 p.m, Holly rang Chris back and they spoke for around 10 minutes. During the call, Chris said to Holly that Daniel had food poisoning as well as Nancy, and they were going to lay low for the next 2 days to recover. An hour later at 4:02 p.m, Benoit went onto his computer and looked at an entry of the Old Testament prophet Elijah. The story is of Prophet Elijah pleading with God to restore the soul of a young boy. Throughout the day, Chris Benoit was also in contact with his colleagues in the WWE. He had been scheduled to perform at that night's live event in Texas. Chavo Guerrero had agreed to pick Benoit up from the airport that afternoon and then drive him to the arena. Benoit spoke with him by phone and told him that he wouldn't be able to make it because Nancy and Daniel were ill. During the call, Benoit told Guerrero, "I love you." This was really odd, so Guerrero then called back Chris Benoit and asked his friend if everything was okay, before telling Benoit to make sure that he made it for the next pay-per-view the next day. Between 3:51 and 3:58 a.m. on Sunday morning, Guerrero and referee Scott Armstrong received a series of strange text messages from the phones of both Chris and Nancy. One read, "My physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Georgia." The other, "The dogs are in the enclosed pool area. The garage side door is open." Chris Benoit then took his own life in the home's basement gym. He had previously Googled methods of how to take your life quickly. He was 40 years old. Talent Relations head became aware of the text messages that were sent to Guerrero and Armstrong, and a welfare check was requested at the Benoit residence at around 12:45 p.m. The police arrived and found them. Investigators found various types of steroids and other pain relief medicine in the Benoit house. The family of Nancy, who was staying at the residence for a brief period after the tragedy, also said they found more needles and prescriptions hidden in a suitcase in a walk-in closet. The autopsy revealed that Chris had 10 times the amount of testosterone as a normal healthy male of his age at the time, indicating that he had taken them within a reasonably short period of time before he took his life. When it came to cause or motive, a medical examiner was unable to say conclusively whether steroids played a role. What investigators did find out during the course of their investigation is that the steroid issue was a major bone of contention between Chris and Nancy. To this day, the wrestling and just the companies in general refuse to acknowledge or actively promote Chris Benoit. A doctor was actually charged with over-prescribing steroids and pain medication to Chris Benoit as well as other wrestlers, and outside of this tragedy, there is a huge scandal of the amount of steroids, the amount of prescription pills that wrestlers have to take. Wrestling as a whole, or the people that owned it or managed it, really just, they celebrated him when it happened, but really have swept this under the rug, as of course it also led into questions, like I said, of the illegal aspects of how many pills and steroids wrestlers were actually taking. Case 5, Marc Cecillon. He was a former French rugby union player who captained the national side on 5 occasions. He represented France from 1988 to 1995, with 46 test caps, including playing in the 1991 and 1995 World Cups. He played number 8 and was a flanker. He was known as the quiet man of French rugby. In August 2004, he was arrested by French police after taking the life of his wife. He fired many shots in front of 60 people at a party. Witnesses grappled with him. He is 1.92 metres, nearly 6 foot 4 inches tall, and weighs around 17 stone. They held him down before police arrived. He admitted to taking the life of his wife, but says he doesn't remember actually doing it. On August 7, 2004, the 47-year-old arrived at the birthday barbecue, which was a barbecue for his best friend. It was in a small village outside Lille. Shortly after this, his wife arrived. He had been drinking all afternoon, and his wife Chantal asked him whether maybe he should eat something. He responded by slapping her hard around the face and leaving her with a black eye. He was then asked to leave. His wife refused to go home with him. He returned home and picked up a weapon. He then returned to the party on his Harley Davidson, and shocked guests watched as he walked up and fired 5 shots. They had been together for 24 years. The trial heard how he was known to friends and family as Marco and described as the calm man of rugby, but had been depressed after retiring from being a top sportsman and returning to ordinary life. Psychiatric reports revealed a fragile personality in a depressed state. He was also described as suffering a frenzy of passionate jealousy towards his wife. Under questioning, he insisted he loved his wife but said they argued frequently after she announced her intention to leave him. She had consulted a solicitor 2 weeks before he took her life. He told investigators he thought his wife was being unfaithful and he just wanted to intimidate her. However, friends told police that he had made his wife's life impossible and had assaulted her before the evening he took her life. He also fired into the air on one dispute to scare her. The prosecution said that he fired a revolver into the ceiling at home, as if testing it before returning to the party. A blood test revealed that he was drunk, and on November 10, 2006, he was found guilty of taking the life of his wife and sentenced to 20 years in prison. 5 more years than prosecution had actually wanted. The sentence was reduced to 14 years on appeal, and he was freed on parole on the 7th of July 2011. In September 2018, he was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol, without a licence and at an excessive speed, violence against a person in a state of drunkenness and theft. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison, with 6 suspended, and fined €350. The incident occurred after he was working at a vineyard and was drinking at a post-harvest evening event. He assaulted the owner and some other workers who tried to intervene before getting into a vehicle and hitting a parked truck. At his trial, he acknowledged that he was still struggling with alcohol. Case 6. Bertil Fox. Fox was born in 1951 on the eastern Caribbean island of St. Kitts. He immigrated to London with his family when he was 1 year old. He was encouraged by a cousin to take up bodybuilding. He won the 1969 Junior Mr. Britain at 18. He went on to win nearly every major bodybuilding contest outside of the IFBB, including the 1976 AAU Mr. World, the amateur 1977 NABBA Mr. Universe, and the professional NABBA Mr. Universe in 1978 and in 1979. He competed in 12 shows from 1984 to 1994. He retired and returned to the Caribbean. But on September 30th, 1997, his life changed forever. He walked into his mother-in-law's shop and took her life as well as his girlfriend. He said he shot her and her mother and testified in court. He said his mother-in-law was pushing him out the door, and at that point he pulled out the gun and started shooting. On May 22nd, 1998, he was convicted of taking the lives of the two women. He was originally sentenced to death, but there was a successful appeal, which led to a change in his punishment. For taking Violet and LaCoya Brown's lives, he received life imprisonment. On the 4th of August 2022, Fox was pardoned by the Governor-General of St Kitts after serving 25 years and is now a free man living in the UK. He is 73 years old. Case 7. Lee Hughes. Lee Hughes is an English former professional footballer. He was a striker and represented England's semi-professional team once in 1996. He played for West Brom as well as Coventry. On the 23rd of November 2003, near his home in the village of Meriden in West Midlands, Hughes lost control of his Mercedes and went onto the wrong side of the road before colliding with a Renault. A passenger in the Renault, Douglas Graham, had his life taken in the incident, whilst his wife Maureen and the driver Albert were severely injured. Hughes and his passenger Adrian Smith left the scene before turning themselves into the police 36 hours later. He was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. He denied the charge, though later pleaded guilty to charges of failing to stop and failing to report an accident. Hughes was accused of driving too fast in wet conditions and was described as driving like a madman. He claimed that the brakes on his car had locked, although tests showed that the brakes were in perfect working order and had technology installed to prevent the driver from losing control. When asked where he had been in the 36 hours after leaving the scene of the incident, he said, "I would rather not say really," although later he admitted that he travelled 20 miles away. The police believe he fled the scene to dodge a breath test. On the 9th of August 2004, Hughes was found guilty of causing death by dangerous driving and was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. Hughes lodged an appeal against the sentence, but not the conviction. In January 2005, his appeal for his sentence to be reduced was refused. He served his time in Category C prisons. During his time in prison, he played in the Staffordshire County Senior League for the prison football team. He also helped to organise a charity football match which raised £5,000 for a children's hospice. He was released in August 2007, 3 years into his 6-year sentence. His statement being, "After today, I do not intend to discuss or make comment about the events which led to my imprisonment. I have made this decision, not out of protection for myself, but with regard to the privacy and respect for the families involved. I made dreadful mistakes and decisions that will live with me for the rest of my life. It also greatly affected my immediate family, including my wife and children, and I will never forgive myself for this." After he released, he played for different football teams, never in the Premier League, but in the Conference and those lower. On the 3rd of December 2011, Hughes was arrested and bailed on charges of SA after an incident in Croydon. He was then charged with the offence on the 30th of January 2012. In May 2012, Hughes was found guilty of common assault and fined £500, but the charge of SA was dropped. He remains free today. Case 8. Another very famous case, Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez was an American professional football player who was a tight end in the NFL. He played 3 seasons with the New England Patriots. He was born in Connecticut and raised by his parents who had a very unstable relationship. His father Dennis pushed him and his brother very harshly, but especially in sports, but often became abusive towards them and their mother. He would physically attack them, sometimes for no reason at all, or they were alcohol related, but often it came when their father believed they were not trying hard enough in sports. In January 2006, when Hernandez was 16 years old, his father Dennis passed away. Hernandez became estranged from his mother and moved in with Tanya Singleton, his older cousin. But he excelled in American football. It's reported that he was not popular with his teammates and had few friends in the locker room. The New England Patriots said that Hernandez was often seeking attention and at times seemed unhinged. Hernandez had a number of run-ins with the law throughout his life, beginning just a few months after he arrived in Florida. By his own admission, Hernandez became jumpy in nightclubs and had a history of taking offence at minor slights. He also said that he believed people were trying to physically challenge him and were looking to fight him. Acquaintances described him as a follower who put himself in jeopardy by hanging out with a dangerous crowd. An NFL footballer, he hired 2 friends from where he grew up to be his assistants. Both friends had long criminal records. one of these friends being Alexander Bradley, who was his drug dealer. As the assistant, Bradley's other duties included calming Hernandez down during fits of rage and paranoia and obtaining weapons for him. On the 30th of September 2007, someone approached a car containing Randall Carson, Justin Glass and Corey Smith on foot and fired 5 shots while they were waiting at a traffic light after having left a nightclub. Smith was shot and Glass was put in his arm, but both men survived and Carson, who was in the back seat, was unharmed. They told police that the shooter was a Hawaiian or Hispanic male with a large build. He picked a photo of Hernandez out of a police lineup. 4 other Florida football players are also questioned, but he was never charged, but remained a person of interest until March 2017, when the police closed the case after a witness who had identified him had recanted. Hernandez was investigated in connection with another crime. 2 people's lives were taken on July 16, 2012, near the Cure Lounge in Boston's South End. Witnesses testified that they saw his silver SUV pull up next to the victims, and someone from his car yell racial slurs before firing shots. In 2013, Hernandez travelled to California with his fiancée, Cheyenne Jenkins, and their young daughter, whilst he would have shoulder surgery. While there, Jenkins called the police twice in less than a week, claiming that Hernandez was drunk and was being violent. In the first incident, Hernandez put his hands through a window. Hernandez's brother and friends later said that there were drugs and guns in the rented apartment, but police determined that Jenkins and the child were not in danger and never searched the property. Odin Lloyd was found with his life taken in an industrial park about a mile from Aaron Hernandez's house. On June 18, 2013, police searched his home in connection with an investigation. The following day, Hernandez assured the head coach at his NFL team that he had nothing to do with this. Despite this, he was barred from the stadium. On June 26, 2013, Hernandez was charged with first-degree murder, in addition to 5 gun-related charges, and he was released from the team. 2 other men were also arrested in connection with Lloyd's death. On August 22, 2013, Hernandez was indicted by a grand jury for taking the life of Lloyd. He pled not guilty on the 6th of September 2013. On April 15, 2015, he was found guilty in the first degree, a charge that in Massachusetts automatically carries a sentence of life in prison without any possibility of parole. He was also found guilty of 5 firearm charges. A motive of why he did this was never actually established. One possibility was that Lloyd may have learned about Aaron Hernandez being bisexual and that Hernandez was worried that Lloyd might out him to others. After his conviction, he gave power of attorney to his agent and instructed him to provide his fiancée with $3,000 a month and to help her find more affordable housing. He also set aside $500,000 for his fiancée and their daughter and $120,000 for a close friend. In phone calls from prison, he can be heard speaking lovingly to his daughter and requesting the Harry Potter books he loved reading. He talked about how cozy his cell was and about how neat he liked to keep his cell, and how he would make his bed every day and have his little pillow, and he had his clothesline. At one point, he had what he was describing as a pet mouse. In April 2017, he took his own life and was found in his prison cell. After he passed away, it was revealed that Hernandez suffered the worst recorded case of CTE, a brain disease linked to repeated concussions, that scientists had ever seen in anyone of his age. His brain showed severe damage, particularly in areas affecting judgment, behaviour and impulse control. In one of his prison calls, he said, "You know I have no memory. You know my memory's cooked." This obviously created a debate and discussion about whether this affected him in any way. Was this the reason that he chose a life of crime, even though he was a well-decorated NFL player? It also highlighted changes in the NFL and more regular checks for NFL players. Case 9, Chris Dawson. Chris Dawson is an Australian rugby player. He was born in Sydney and is a twin. His twin brother Paul also was a professional rugby league player. Dawson met his wife Lynette Sims at a high school function in 1965 when they were 16. They went on to get married in 1970 and had 2 daughters. Both brothers played the rugby union for the eastern suburbs and were both part of the 1973 New South Wales Rugby League Club Championship winning team. After the rugby career finished, Chris became a PE teacher at a public high school on the Northern Beaches and the North Shore of Sydney. While married to Lynette, in 1980 he began a relationship with a 16-year-old pupil, Joanne Curtis. In January 1982, Lynette went missing. 2 days after Lynette's disappearance, Chris Dawson invited his mistress, Joanna Curtis, to move into the family house. He reported his wife missing on the 18th of February 1982, 6 weeks after her disappearance, claiming she had left after marital problems and had joined a commune. He finalised divorce proceedings against Lynette in 1983. Lynette has never been found. 2 inquests were conducted in 2001 and 2003, and they both concluded that Lynette Dawson had her life taken by a known person. On the 5th of December 2018, Dawson was arrested by detectives for taking the life of Lynette Dawson. On the 6th of December 2018, he would face trial. In his appearance at Sydney's Central Local Court that day, he was refused bail and was remanded in custody. On the 17th of December 2018, he was granted bail and his family paid $1.5 million for him to be released. He appeared in local court in June 2019 and he pleaded not guilty to taking the life of Lynette Dawson. In February 2020, Dawson was committed to stand trial for taking her life, and on the 2nd of December 2022, Dawson was sentenced to 24 years in jail with a non-parole period of 18 years for taking the life of Lynette. In May 2023, Dawson faced charges related to carnal knowledge, which is a historical offence, of a student in his class. He was found guilty on the 28th of June 2023. He was sentenced to imprisonment for 3 years with a non-parole period of 2 years, with the sentence to begin in August 2039 after the completion of his current sentence. He remains in prison and is 76 years old. Case 10. Sergio Mitre. Mitre is a Mexican-American former professional baseball pitcher. He played in Major League Baseball for the Chicago Cubs, Florida Marlins and Milwaukee Brewers, as well as the New York Yankees. He played for Team Mexico in the 2018 Caribbean Series. On the 1st of September 2019, while playing in the Mexican League, he was arrested on suspicion of assaulting a woman after employees at a Quality Inn alerted authorities of a domestic violence situation taking place inside a suite. Following his arrest, he was denounced from the league. He avoided jail time by paying a fine of $20,000. On July 13, 2020, he was arrested for possession of drugs, and on July 14th, he was charged with femicide and statutory R for taking the life of his girlfriend's daughter. The R charges were later dropped. On the 20th of January 2022, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison after being convicted for femicide and taking the life of his girlfriend's 22-month-old daughter. He was ordered to issue a public apology and pay $1.3 million penalty for damages caused by his action. 11. Tommy Kane. Tommy Kane is a Canadian professional football player. He played for the Seattle Seahawks of the National Football League for 4 years and then Toronto of the Canadian Football League for 1 year. In 1988, while at university, Kane was arrested for assaulting a police officer after the officer attempted to have his illegally parked car towed. He was charged with second-degree assault, second-degree obstructing governmental administration and resisting arrest. He was sentenced to community service. On November 30th, 2003, Kane severely attacked his estranged wife in his mother's house in Quebec. She passed away at the age of 35. She passed away in the arms of a church counsellor from Kane's church, who was at the home with the intention of taking Kane to a detox centre. The couple had just recently separated. He was originally charged with second-degree murder and he pleaded guilty to manslaughter for the act. Prosecutors took his depression into account, agreeing to the lesser count. There was a dispute as to whether he intended to take the life of his wife and claimed during his trial that he didn't remember the attack fully. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. In 2010, a judge ordered Kane to pay damages of $590,000 to his estranged wife's family. $125,000 was awarded to each of Kane's 4 children and $90,000 to her sister, who had full custody of the 4 children. In 2015, the Canadian Parole Board approved Kane for 6 months of day parole while he continued to serve his 18-year sentence. Case 12. Georgi Semerdzhiev. He was a former professional football player from Bulgaria and he played as a forward. On July 5, 2022 in Sofia in Bulgaria, while intoxicated, he was going over the speed limit in an SUV with fake license plates with no driver's license. He ran a red light, hitting a taxi and taking the lives of 2 women aged 21 and 26 who were on the sidewalk. He fled the scene but was arrested the next day in an apartment a few hundred meters from the car accident. On the 21st of the 4th, 2023, the Sofia City Court sentenced him to 20 years in prison and to pay $850,000. In 2020, he was also investigated for participating in an illegal sports betting scheme. There are also reports that he is being investigated for the distribution of narcotics. He appealed just last week but has not been sentenced yet. Case 13. Jean-Luc Cairon. He was a French gymnast who competed at the 1984 LA Olympics. After this, he settled in Oklahoma in the USA and he started the Craft Academy as a co-owner and a coach. He then coached for almost 4 years at the South Country Gymnastics in Jenks in Oklahoma and served as an assistant to women's gymnastics coach at Arizona State University. In 2021, one of the athletes alleged that he had groomed her and touched her inappropriately, leading to a report to the United States Center for Safe Sport. One girl said she was essayed by him for 3 years, beginning in 2018. Another girl said that he touched her inappropriately during both practice and outside of practice, starting in January 2020 and lasting about a year. She was 14 years old at the time. Another woman, who is now 28, said her essay began when she was 13 and occurred between 2005 and 2006. 3 more athletes from the 1990s and 2000s have come forward saying that they were too essayed by him while attending Craft Academy. He was arrested and pleaded guilty to several charges, resulting in a sentence of 25 years in prison, with a total incarceration of 100 years recommended. He passed away in prison in February 2022 at the age of 60. Case 14. Warrington Phillip. Phillip is a former West Indian first-class cricketer. He represented the Leeward Islands cricket team a lot in the Red Stripe Cup during the 1990s and played for his home island. He did cup campaigns in 1993, 1994, 1995 and 1996. He played a major part in the 1995-96 Cup final against Trinidad and Tobago. On the 16th of February 2006, Phillip's wife, Shamel, was found with her life taken in the back of her car. Phillip was arrested and charged by police. On the 15th of November 2008, a jury found him guilty. He was due to be sentenced on the 22nd of December 2008, but this was deferred to the 6th of Feb 2009. He was sentenced to life in prison and still remains there. Case 15. Evangelos Goussis was an Australian former boxer and kickboxer from Victoria. He was born in Uzbek in the Soviet Socialist Republic of the USSR to a family of Greek immigrants. He arrived in Australia at the age of 8, and during his early 20s he drifted into a life of crime after meeting many criminal associates as he was a bouncer. He also was a boxer. By 1987 he was a contender for the 1988 Summer Olympics, however he didn't qualify. In the early 1990s he competed in kickboxing. He became the World Kickboxing Association middleweight champion. Lewis Kane was an underworld figure based in Melbourne and the boyfriend of lawyer Zara Wilson. On the 8th of May 2004, Goussis and associate Keith Fair travelled to Melbourne to meet with Kane. Kane was found in the Colton Hotel with his life taken. On the 8th of May 2004 it was the trial, and he claimed self-defence, stating Kane produced a weapon and fired at him, however the gun jammed. He stated he then took the life of Kane with a single shot. He was found guilty by a jury for taking the life of Kane. He was also charged with taking the life of another man, Lewis Moran. He was shot outside a club on the 31st of March in Sydney. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum 30-year non-parole period. It emerged that evidence prosecution used was actually fabricated to fit alongside telephone calls that were given to police. In 2014, he released his account of events and alleged police misconduct and called for a royal commission, but this never happened and he remains behind bars. Case 16. Joseph Ntshongwana is a former South African rugby player. He played from 1998 to 2001 and appeared in 2 major tournaments. He had 9 caps. He was arrested in 2011 for taking the lives of 4 men and injuring 2 others using an axe to avenge the gang R of his daughter that he thought happened earlier in 2011. Police later reported that the R never occurred. In court, he was violent and spoke in tongues. He had his mental health assessed, and it was revealed that he was mentally ill, suffering from disorders. His father told the court that his son suffered from bipolar disorder. A psychiatrist testified that he was not mentally unstable and that the crimes were premeditated and deliberate. In February 2012, a Durban court declared him fit to stand trial. In December 2014, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences. He remains in prison. Case 17. Nizar Trabelsiis is a Tunisian former professional footballer. He played in Germany mainly, notably for Dusseldorf. He was a midfielder. He had travelled to Afghanistan and met Osama bin Laden on several occasions, and in 2001 he was suspected of plotting to attack a US embassy in Paris, which was uncovered and stopped. He is said to be the designated bomber and was to wear a business suit to conceal what he was wearing before walking into the embassy. He was arrested in his apartment in Brussels in Belgium on the 13th of September 2001. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in a Belgian prison. He was deported to America. In 2014, the European Court of Human Rights found that his deportation was performed in violation of Article 3 of the Human European Rights and ordered Belgium to pay him €60,000 in damages. On the 14th of July 2023, he was found not guilty in an American federal court. Despite the outcome of this trial, he still remains in an American prison. He said he is held in what he calls a black hole. Case 18. Marc Rogowski was an American former professional skateboarder. He started his professional skateboarding career in 1980 at the age of 14. In 1982, he won his first major contest in Canada. In 1984, he won a national championship, and at the height of his fame, he was being paid between $4,000 and $8,000 a month for clothing and skateboarding equipment endorsements. In 1986, he was detained by police in Virginia Beach after assaulting an officer in the parking lot of the Mount Rushmore Park during the East Coast Assault Pro contest. He was introduced to Brandy McLean and her good friend Jessica Bergston, who was an aspiring model. Soon afterwards, he began a long-term relationship with Brandy McLean. They appeared in lots of adverts and campaigns together. He had a severe accident in West Germany and either fell or was pushed from a hotel window, so he returned home to recover. When he returned, he befriended Augie Constantino, who was an ex-surfer turned born-again Christian, who also became his spiritual advisor. He converted to a strict evangelical form of Christianity, and after 4 years of dating Brandy, he suggested the couple marry, proclaiming they can't be intimate anymore unless they got married. The sudden lifestyle change contributed to the end of their relationship, as well as his bouts of violence, which included him locking her in a wardrobe and unprovoked jealousy, so she returned to her parents' home in San Diego in California. After the breakdown of his relationship, he turned heavily to alcohol, but he was also still jealous. He entered Brandy's home to steal gifts that he had given her, and he made threatening telephone calls to Brandy's new boyfriend. He also threatened her directly. On the 20th of March 1991, he talked with 22-year-old Jessica, who was Brandy's friend, for the first time in years. Jessica asked him to show her around San Diego. They spent a day together on March 21st. According to Marc, he and Jessica then went back to his condo to watch movies, smoke and drink wine. He then came up behind her and took her life. She was found by campers in the desert on the April 10th, 1991. Shortly after, he confessed to his friend, his spiritual healer. "Remember that girl from the poster? Yeah, I took her life." His friend encouraged him to confess his crime to the police, and he turned himself in on April 11th, 1991, and led the police to where he had placed her. Police searched his home and found items. In his confession, he said that he had taken Jessica's life in misplaced act of revenge towards Brandy McLean, saying that Jessica was made from the same mould Brandy was made out of. He was charged of taking her life and a special circumstances enhancement because the crime was committed during AR. He received a 31-year to life prison sentence, 6 years for forcible R and 25 years to life for the first-degree murder charges to be served consecutively. After entering prison, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Although he claimed to take responsibility for his actions while in court, he later attempted to retract his police confession and change his story. In June 2022, a San Diego County Parole Board granted him parole with his attorney citing the Parole Board's trained psychologist found him to be a low risk of danger to the public. This was to be followed by a 120-day review period by the board, and then up to 30 days for the governor to make a final decision. However, the governor reversed the Parole Board's decision, saying that he would continue to serve his sentence behind bars. As of 2024, he is still incarcerated at the Donovan State Prison. Case 19. Mario Metushev was a Bulgarian professional footballer who played as a forward. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for taking the life of his childhood best friend on the 15th of June 2018. The pair were celebrating a popular Muslim festival when he took the friend's life. It's believed that he suspected that his best friend betrayed him to the police for illegally selling tobacco, for which he spent some time in custody. During court proceedings and in prison, he had many mental breakdowns, and it's believed that he suffered from severe psychological issues. After the prosecutors protested against the initial court decision, the Sofia Court of Appeal sentenced him to life in prison. The Bulgarian Supreme Court confirmed the Court of Appeal's ruling on August 4, 2023, leaving the former football player without the possibility of parole or any further appeals. Case 20. Toomas Leius. He is a former tennis player from Estonia who competed for the Soviet Union. He was the boys' single champion at the 1959 Wimbledon Championships. He won the Soviet Championships in 1963, 1964, 1965 and 1968. He also won the Moscow International Indoor Championship 5 times from 1961 to 1969. On the 13th of May 1974, he took the life of his wife after finding her in bed with another man. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and was released after serving 5 years for good behaviour. He worked as a tennis coach after leaving prison and spent some time as the captain of Estonia's Federal Cup team. He is 83 years old. 21. Cierre Marcelle Wood is a former American football running back. He played college football at Notre Dame. He was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Houston Texans in 2013. Wood and his girlfriend Amy Taylor were arrested on April 10, 2019 by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department on charges of taking his girlfriend's 5-year-old daughter's life, as well as abuse. He was also accused of forcing Lorea, the 5-year-old girl, to participate in extreme exercise routines as a punishment for being overweight. On the 13th of August 2024, Wood was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after entering an Alford plea. He remains in prison. Case 22. Gavin Grant. Gavin Grant was an English professional football player. His career started in non-league Tooting and Mitcham before being signed by Gillingham. He later joined Millwall, although he couldn't stay out of crime. On the 26th of Feb 2010, he was accused of taking the life of Jamal Moore in 2005, but he was cleared of this in 2007. On the 23rd of July 2010, Gavin Grant was found guilty along with Gareth Downey of taking the life of 21-year-old Leon Lebastide in May 2004. The courts heard that both incidents were part of a tit-for-tat in Stonebridge Park Estate. He received a life sentence subject to a minimum of 25 years in prison. On the 31st of October 2014, Grant was given the right to appeal his conviction after 3 senior judges at the Court of Appeal had concerns over the 2010 trial, as police failed to disclose important details about one of the key witnesses. However, the appeal was rejected in November 2015. The judges concluded that the evidence remained compelling and he remains in prison. Case 23, Phillip Adams. Adams played in 78 NFL games over 5 seasons. For New England Patriots, Seattle Seahawks, the San Francisco 49ers, Oakland Raiders, the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons. He suffered a severe ankle injury in 2010 that required surgery as well as several screws. Adams later suffered 2 concussions over 3 games with the Raiders in 2012. It's not clear whether Adams suffered long-term damage from the injuries, as he was not able to get a settlement between the NFL and former players because he hadn't retired by 2012. However, his father believed these injuries are to blame for all the problems his son had. On the 8th of April 2021, Adams went on a rampage and took the lives of 5 people and then himself. He took the life of Dr. Robert Leslie, who actually treated Adams and lived near Adams' family's home, his wife Barbara and their grandchildren, Ada and Noah, as well as a man who had been working at their home, James Lewis. A 6th person was also injured. There was a standoff with police at his parents' house, and the police tried to negotiate, but he then took his own life. Case 24, Brian Phelps. Brian Phelps is an English former diver. He won the gold medal in the 10-metre platform at the 1958 European Championships. At the age of 14 and again in 1962 at the age of 18. He competed in the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome at the age of 16, where he took a bronze. He also won 4 gold medals at the Commonwealth, with double gold in 1962 and 1966 games. He went on to found the Olga Trampoline Club along with his wife Monica, who was also an Olympic artistic gymnast. Phelps was remanded in custody at Bournemouth Court in January 2008 after being charged with attempted and 19 indecent assaults on 2 girls. The attacks plus 19 indecent assaults took place from 1976 to 1986, while the girls were between 6 and 15 years old. He was further charged with 6 counts of SA on a girl under 14 and 1 count of gross indecency. These offences to have taken place between 1975 and 1980. He next appeared in court on the 25th of March. At his trial, Phelps admitted to 42 charges of indecent assault and indecency. He was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment and served 6 years in prison before being released on licence. He will remain on the register for life. In 2023, it was claimed that there were at least 12 further victims, but as of 2024, he remains a free man. And that concludes our video today. Obviously, some of these cases are more in depth and have more information, and towards the end, I like to almost do a quick fire round of cases, as I try to put as many in one video as possible. Like my video of the most disgraced celebrities, again, I feel like in a lot of these cases, there's not very harsh sentencing or punishment for these sportsmen. And it makes you wonder, if it was a normal person without the sports status or the celebrity status, would they receive the same sentence and treatment? Probably not, but that probably isn't surprising. It isn't to me or to you. This is my favourite season. Halloween is coming up, so there's lots of videos to come. One on Mick Philpott. There's going to be a Halloween special, so I'm working on them. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.